Hello there, Ray here, and welcome to UnderLoad. This farm is insanely productive as well as insanely large, and hence the name. It takes place in the underworld, also known as the nether. So how productive is this farm? Well, this farm is capable of producing 2.4 million items per hour. This entire wall of double chests can be filled just in 1 hour. And how large is this farm? This farm takes up 16,000 chunks. This is 62 times larger than most perimeters. Even though this farm is quite large, it's actually pretty simple to understand how it works. We're sitting here in the nether dimension and we're just on top of the farm. The farm itself consists of entirely nether portals, and these nether portals actually allow mobs to spawn in them. Since the nether portal blocks themselves here don't have any collision box, so just like a player can walk through them, a mob can also be able to spawn in them. Since there's nothing colliding up here and they just spawn down here on top of the solid block, which is the obsidian. Now nether portals do put off a light level of 11, so in the nether, mobs such as endermen cannot spawn, since endermen actually need a lower light level to be able to spawn. So mobs such as ghast don't depend on the light level, and the same goes for pigmen as well as magma cubes. So these can actually spawn inside these nether portals. So once a mob does spawn inside the nether portals, after 3 game ticks the mob will be teleported by the nether portals blocks themselves over into the overworld. Because of this, the nether mob will no longer be in the nether, and it will no longer count towards the mob cap. So in this way we can actually have tons of mobs being able to spawn in the nether, and within 3 game ticks we'll have them all removed and placed in the overworld, and therefore the mob cap in the nether will never get filled. Once a mob is placed over in the overworld, they will automatically be placed inside of the blocks. Since there is actually no nether portals on the overworld side, the mobs will not actually be sent to a nether portal, but instead just be placed in an area that is consistent with the nether portal on the nether side, but over on the overworld. So then this gas here was placed just inside of all this ice and blocks below, and it just suffocated, and therefore all the loots will be able to be placed inside of the blocks, and then they will just gradually drift upwards and be placed inside this water stream, and the water streams will take all the loots towards the center where you can be able to store them. So with this farm there's over 90,000 spawning spaces, and this consists of just 2 layers of nether portals that are the size of a perimeter. And on average I got 33.3 mobs per game tick, and that just shows how fast the farm is, because you can actually measure how many mobs are coming in per game tick rather than, let's say, minute or hour. And because there are so many mobs spawning at once because of all the spawning spaces, you can at times actually have over 100 hostile mobs in the same perimeter at once, even with just 1 player on. This is just because there's so many spawning spaces, and it does take 3 game ticks for the mobs to leave. So on average there's about 100 mobs in the perimeter per every time they are teleported away. And on average you get about 2.4 million mobs per hour. And because most mobs drop about 1 item per mob, and except for like chickens as well as gas, which can be a little bit higher, on average you get about 2.4 million items per hour. That's equivalent to a 26 by 26 area of double chests, and every double chest being full of items. And if you happen to snag a bunch of shulker boxes, this is a 5 by 5 area of double chests which are full of shulker boxes. Each shulker box has an entire box full of items, so quite a few items. You can see the difference between holding shulker boxes versus holding them in double chests. So out of the about 1.4 million mobs per hour, you get about 95% of those mobs being pigmen, and that means about 1.1 million flesh per hour and 1.1 million golden nuggets per hour. You take all those golden nuggets and you turn them into ingots and then turn those into golden blocks. You get about 14,000 golden blocks per hour, which is quite a few. Now, if you also have pigmen spawning, you also have gas spawning, and they spawn about 2% of the time. This means about 32,000 gunpowder per hour with this farm, and this also means 16,000 tears per hour. So quite a few tears out of this farm. And then magma cubes comes in about 2% as well, because both gas and magma cubes can fail to spawn near the edges of the portal, so their spawning percentage is a little bit different from maybe typically spawning in the nether. Now here, 2% of the magma cubes, this means 12,000 cream per hour. If you turn those magma cream and turn those into magma blocks, you get about 3,000 magma blocks per hour, which is a pretty good magma block farm if you think about it. Now you'll also be able to get chicken drops. Now this is because of the bug that is still in 1.11 where jockeys do not naturally spawn in the game. So spider jockeys, well as chicken jockeys, do not naturally spawn. And the problem with this is that if they would happen to spawn, this farm would actually fill up with chicken jockeys very quickly. But because of this bug, this farm actually works very nicely because the chickens as well as their riders will instantly be removed through the portals because they will be separated. So instead of just a pigman riding on top of a chicken, you just have a chicken spawn. And since the chicken is an individual actual mob, it's not writing anything, it will be able to go through the portal. But in like older versions in 1.8, where there would be a baby zombie riding on top of a chicken, since there are two mobs and they're riding on top of each other, they would not be able to go through the portal block. Therefore, they would actually hold up the mob cap. So this actually works in advantage for this farm, and because of that, you actually get about 0.3% of the mobs being chickens, and that means about 7,200 raw chicken per hour, and about 7,200 feathers per hour. I started the farm up so you can see how it works. I got a player sitting over in the nether, and he is loading part of the farm, and you can see the mobs are getting teleported through the nether portals and being placed over here in the overworld. They don't actually generate new nether portals, but instead they are just placed in the coordinates in the nether, but they are just times 8. So what this means is that if this pigment here spawned in the nether coordinates 10x and 10z, then once he comes over here in the overworld and he's teleported over here, he'll be set in the coordinates 80x as well as 80z. Now the y coordinates is kept the same, and since we have our farm over in the nether side quite low in the y value, they will also stay in a low y value as well. So we actually have two layers of nether portals, and they're both at the very bottom of the world. And one of the layers you can see is about around Y level 6, and that's why the pigmen as well as the other mobs are spawning at this level. You also have mobs spawning lower if we load more of the farm, but currently I'm just loading mostly the top part of the farm. You can see how spaced out the pigmen are. This is just because for every one block the pigmen spawns in the nether, once they're sent to the overworld, it's times 8, and because of this we can have the mobs being spread out. Now if you would not actually kill these mobs, you would see a definite pattern here, because every mob will actually be 8 meters apart from each other. Let's say this pigment here spawned in the center of one portal, and this pigment over here spawned in the center of the portal block right beside this one. Now both, even though they're right beside each other, once they come over in the overworld, you can see they're exactly 8 meters apart from each other. And because of this, all these mobs are actually going to spawn exactly 8 meters apart from each other, and you can see it turns out to be looking like a grid. Once the mobs die inside of these solid blocks here, the items will just slowly drift through these solid blocks and eventually reach the top, in which we have some ice as well as some water. And because all the mobs are exactly spaced out 8 meters from each other, we can easily avoid items from accidentally appearing underneath of this part here, and we just have the mobs spawn, and we have the water stream as 8 meters as well. And because of that, the items will come up and get collected in this water stream, and they'll all be sent to the center, and from the center they will all be pulled into the very center, and I just have some lava here which is destroying the items. But yeah, you can see there's a lot of items coming through, and right now I'm only loading a small part of the farm, so there's not like a zillion items coming through, and there's also the lag is pretty manageable for my computer. You can see that the actual farm is a perimeter sized circle just full of nether portals, and the nether portals are just crammed in there. And if you want to know more about the shape of this farm and why we have it down low, I will link in the description to my previous mob farm where I explain the optimization of the mob farm. But here we do have it so that the gas can spawn in here as well as the magma cubes, but they can't spawn up against these edges, and these are full-size portals being about 21 meters long worth of portal blocks. Now we do have it so that the entire farm is sitting at the bedrock level down here, so it is quite optimized. And also there's a lot of stuff going on with this farm because of all the mobs that are getting teleported through the portals, because every time a mob spawns in the portal, the game has to try to figure out where to actually send that mob using calculations, which can lag the game down. After a while, this lag will actually go down quite a bit, but because the farm is so huge, it does cause lag even after a while. So it is kind of a theoretical farm because of so much lag that's going on. It would be kind of difficult to run this farm on your server. Now this entire collection area is started right here in the spawn chunks. You can see underneath all this green stuff is the spawn chunks, and we have hopper chunk loaders that are just going out in all directions, loading more of the area. Now since there is enough hopper chunk loaders, they're actually loading the outside parts of the spawn chunks as entity processing chunks, so mobs that are even way out here will be able to get suffocation damage, and their items will be able to travel through the ice streams, even though they're not part of spawn chunks. There'll be pseudo entity processing chunks, and this way it's just a lot simpler to actually collect items rather than trying to take spawn chunks and then travel it out of ways and then create a huge section like this. By having it right here in spawn, it's a lot easier to have all the items being transported over into the spawn chunks, because this can be used just for a single player situation where there's just one player online and all the items are collected in overworld without the player actually being here to load it. There you have it, guys, breaking 2 million items per hour UnderLoad, the most insane hostile mob farm for vanilla survival. And if you'd like to see this world in more detail, there will be a link in the description to the world download. But if you found this interesting, show me a like. If you'd like to see vanilla survival pushed to its limits, subscribe, and don't forget to comment. Bye bye!